Folks, it's Tom here, Tom at psychsafety.com. I thought I'd try another little video, and this time I'm going to talk about the top 10 ways to foster psychological safety in the workplace. And in this time, I'm sharing my screen. I'm using Loom to do this, and so if you head over to Google or your preferred search engine of choice, type in ways to foster psychological safety. You should get this list. You should get our top 10 ways to foster psychological safety in the workplace. And this is a list that we've put together over, and we sort of learned and then put together over years of running workshops and consultancy and training and things with organizations all over the world in different domains, from manufacturing to healthcare to aviation and safety critical environments and tech and all sorts of stuff. And these are the ways these are the things that we've identified are ubiquitous across all those different domains, across cultures. Now, in practice, there'll be different aspects to how we implement them in practice. There'll be some differences, and maybe some will be a bit more more important or impactful than others. But this remains the top 10. Right. So assuming you've managed to Google building psychological safety in a workplace, you've got our top 10 ways. Let's dive into it. So you can see on the screen here, this is our graphic. I'm just going to try and zoom in a little bit, and there we are. So top 10 ways to foster psychological safety in the workplace. The first thing, like the most powerful, most impactful thing we can do is reducing power gradients. And this isn't that surprising, to be honest, because ever since things like the Tenerife disaster of 77, we've known, research and evidence and practice has shown that it's power gradients, steep power gradients between people that most inhibit voice. And just like in the Tenerife disaster of 77, where the other crew members didn't speak up, or at least didn't speak up forcefully, candidly, clearly, to the captain to say, this is an unsafe thing to do, we should stop, we need to do something else, we need to change our course of action. Even when people's lives are at risk, including the lives of the people speaking up, that power gradient can be so powerful that it prevents us speaking up. That inhibition, and it causes safety silence. So safety silence is kind of the absence of psychological safety, the outcome of a lack of psychological safety. So in order to mitigate this effect, and it's a very strong effect, we should level the power gradient. We should do things like try and use our first names, introduce ourselves via our first names instead of our role or status or rank or something. And that's just one way we can try and try and reduce the power gradient and level that power gradient down. And we can do other things like changing our meeting practices so that we delegate chairing of meetings to those with less power, and that might be junior folks, or it might be folks who are less qualified or less experienced or something like that. And of course, trying to devolve decision making to the sharp end of work, that's a very powerful thing to do. Now, we should recognize as well here, when we're talking about power, we're not just talking about hierarchical, formal power, like you'd see in an org chart. We're talking about all sorts of power, and this might be sort of intersectional power. So it might be you might have a little more power. There might be a power gradient due to your length of tenure in the organization, which might be many years, or it might be very few at all. It might be your actual rank, your actual level, your actual job title, and things like that. It may be the fact that you're an English speaker, you're able-bodied, you're neurotypical, you're wealthy, and you speak English in some contexts, and all sorts of other aspects of power. So it could be gender and sexuality, even all sorts of different. This is why they call it intersectionality, right? All sorts of different factors come into power and power dynamics. So let's move on to the next one. Establishing shared norms. Now this is about creating a social contract or a team charter, some sort of agreement that clarifies and sets the expectations between members of the group about what is acceptable and what is the the right thing to do in that group. And this is really powerful in itself, So the discussion that goes into that goes into creating this is a powerful practice in itself, just to bring people together and discuss this stuff, even if you didn't create anything at the end of it. But you should create something at the end of it. That would be really good. And when you've got that thing, that artifact, that social contract or team charter or agreement, in a short-lived team, that's great, because in a short-lived team, this short-lived team might only be a 2-hour workshop. So creation of that social contract right at the start is a really powerful thing to do. Equally, if you've got a long-lived team, like a team that just exists for as long as there is no perceived end to the team, then this should be a living, breathing, evolving document that gets revisited regularly and changes over time, depending on what the needs and what occurs in the team. So if we find that, for example, people are speaking over each other in meetings, then we can revisit the social contract and add something in that about how we speak up in meetings. So this is really powerful. It is a really strong way to build psychological safety, because it sets those expectations. In relation to this, we also, and we'll touch on this a bit later on, we need to make sure that we actually hold people and ourselves accountable to those norms and expectations that we define in that social contract. Now, number 3 is listen effectively and give space. This is, this sort of stands to reason, right? Psychological safety is about creating the environment where people can speak up without risk. They feel like they don't have to mask to be themselves and stuff like that. So this is creating that listening space where it's quite clear that people that we're giving space to people to use their voice. And now this might be allowing silence in meetings, giving people silence, time to prepare and think about what they want to say and how they want to say it. It might mean different meeting practices, like lean coffee or things like that. It might mean, and it almost certainly, well, it does mean enabling different protocols and practices for speaking up. Speaking up doesn't have to be verbal, right? So it could be written form, it could be email, it could be text, it could be something else. It may be drawing on paper. It may be using whiteboards like Miro. It could be using sign language. There are all sorts of ways in which we can enable that space in which we can listen and give space to people to speak up. The converse of that, number 4, is communicating with empathy. Now, my favourite sort of explicit practice for this is non-violent communication, or giraffe language, as Marshall Rosenberg liked to call it. And this is about modelling compassionate, intelligently articulated, clear language. This is like Kim Scott's concept of radical candor approaches this really well. And not only are we creating a psychologically safe space by doing this, but also modeling how to do this. So the more we do this, the more other people sort of pick up on what we're doing and may be able to practice it without even having been explicitly trained in it. So number five is rewarding speaking up. Now we get more of the things we reward in organizations. We get fewer, in theory, of the things that we punish. Now this is usually the case, but not always the case, because we're punishing and rewarding the things that we don't think we are. Such like if we punish mistakes, we actually don't get fewer mistakes, we just hear about fewer mistakes. But if we reward speaking up, and this is as simple as saying thank you, it's as simple as praising someone for speaking up in a meeting or raising a concern or suggesting an idea. It's just saying thank you, praising people, and being genuinely thankful and responding productively and positively when people tell us stuff. Even if it's stuff, in fact, especially if it's stuff we don't want to hear, like mistakes or things gone over the deadline, or challenging decisions that we've made and things like that. That's even more important to reward that sort of behavior. And that can be hard, right? When someone says, oh, that project we're working on that was supposed to be delivered on Friday, well, it's not. It's going to be delivered in 2 months' time. It's kind of hard to say, to react and kind of go, oh, thanks for telling me that. Great, I appreciate it. But we have to. We are human. We are flawed. We're not going to respond brilliantly every time, but we can try our best. number 6 is kind of related to that in a sense as well. This is about framing work as experiments. Now, what this means is that we appreciate, we acknowledge that not all work, not all things will succeed. Even things that are safety critical and what we might consider essential to succeed. Like, the real world happens, people make mistakes, and planning doesn't always work out, and things go wrong. If we frame work as experiments, we're not lowering the bar for success. What we're saying is everything we do is a learning practice. We want to learn from this, and we want to make sure we get better next time. We want to succeed at the thing, but the main outcome of the work and the way we design the work should be, how do we maximize our learning from doing this thing? That's what we mean by framing work as experiments. The outcome of work should be learning how to do it better next time. And one of the practices of doing that, so like there's framing work as experiments, but then there's actually doing the experiment, learning from it, is the use of retrospectives. Retrospectives literally meaning looking back, and in different contexts these are called different things. So in different industries you might hear things like debriefs, lessons learned, wash-ups, post-mortems, and retrospectives, and all sorts of other terms. After action reviews are a great practice in this. Now, just a note on the word post-mortems. I know a lot of organizations, a lot of teams, lots of people in different domains use the word post-mortem to just, as a way of looking back at a project or something that went wrong. Personally, I don't like to use it unless someone actually died. I think it means after death. I think the language we use is important. So if we're going to maximize the chances of learning from something, we should frame that learning exercise in a positive light, not something died and we need to do something about it. So retrospectives are a great way to look at work and examine how we can do that again better in the future. Futurespectives are kind of like retrospectives but looking forward. So they're imagining this future scenario, usually failure, like usually a big failure. This has really gone wrong. How did we get there? But you can also do it for success, and that's fantastic too. What futurespectives do, like TRIZ is a great futurespective, is allow us to imagine this future state where it's gone catastrophically wrong, and lay out all the potential things that led to that scenario. Now, and we can then look at all those things and say, and imagine, and work out, are we doing any of those things right now? Does any of the work that we're doing actually look like that stuff that we've just talked about? Because if it does, we should probably do something about that. That highlights a risk. So it actually identifies real risks and real issues that we need to fix, but it also allows us to strengthen our learning from failure muscle. It allows us to practice talking about failure in a safe way because it hasn't actually happened. So when it does happen, and it will, then we've already practiced it. We've already done it a bit through this sort of simulation exercises, and so that's really powerful, because then when it comes to doing it for real, we're much better at it, and that's when it's really important, right? When failure does actually happen. Then there's number 8 is addressing problematic behavior. Now, we can't do this unless we've done number 2, establishing shared norms, because, well, maybe with a few exceptions. But it's important to have those shared norms, and if people do break those norms, break the social contract, break the agreement that we've all agreed to, and this is why it's important to co-create that, because we can't hold people to a contract that they haven't been part of creating, right? So we need to co-create this contract, this agreement, and if people do continuously, repeatedly breach this contract, then we need to address that. And in addressing it, we're not only addressing the problem and sort of making that better. Like if someone consistently speaks over someone, over other people in a meeting, then we need to address that, because it makes the meeting inefficient. Like, we are there to get work done, right? So we need to address that. We need to improve that practice. But it also sets it reassures members of the group that those boundaries exist and are upheld, that they are consistently upheld and respected. And this is important, because what's the point? If we create a social contract and then don't uphold it, then, well, it's not worth the paper it's written on, right? So addressing problematic behavior is key. This helps everyone feel included, and helps foster psychological safety and performance in a team. Now, there will, and I've had cases where we may have to let someone go. We may have to sack someone for consistent, repeated, problematic behavior. And as I've said a few times before, psychological safety doesn't mean not sacking anyone. It means we have to handle that in very sensitive and intelligent ways. But this at its extreme may mean letting someone go from the team. Number 9 is embracing differences. This is the point that psychological safety doesn't look the same to everyone. The psychological safety in a software development team doesn't look the same as psychological safety in a sales team. And psychological safety in a hospital doesn't look the same as psychological safety in a factory. And psychological safety in Japan doesn't look the same as psychological safety in America. And psychological safety to neurotypical folks might not look the same as psychological safety to neurodiverse folks. And this ranges from maintaining eye contact to speech patterns to practices to things like, whether we're, like the sales team standing up on tables, ringing a bell and shouting about the last, the money they just made. I'm thinking of selling Sunset. And although that's not particularly psychologically safe, good example. And the software development team, who are all sitting in their sort of subdued lighting room with their headphones on and multiple screens in silence, but they're maintaining 15 different conversations on 10 different channels. That's psychologically safe to them, and the sales team is psychologically safe. It doesn't look the same, but it doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong, right? And there's also, we could get into this, and we have got into this in previous videos, and we will in future videos, I'm sure. But yeah, psychological safety doesn't look the same for everyone. We should resist this temptation to sort of create a cookie cutter approach to psychological safety that it looks like this. There is no, it doesn't look like a particular thing. Finally, accepting human error as normal. As we kind of said, we all make mistakes. We're human. We're fallible. We will make mistakes. The context exists for us to make mistakes. Context drives behavior, and if we prioritize improving environments, looking at the context behind mistakes, decisions, and outcomes. And if we look at the systematic causes of both failure and success over individual blame and just telling people to work harder and try harder and stop making mistakes, that's fundamentally that's a fundamental driver behind psychological safety and physical and human safety. So this is environments that blame people for mistakes, environments that blame people for error, tend to be psychologically unsafe and tend to be physically unsafe as well. Whereas the converse applies. Environments and organizations and teams that consider human error to be a problem of the system and behavior driven by context tend to be psychologically safer and actually physically safer as well. So yeah, there's our top 10 ways to build psychological safety. I encourage you to head online, Google for top 10 ways to build psychological safety, and you'll get to this page. I'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts. Have you put this into practice? What do you think about it? What others would you add to this list? We're going to, no doubt at all, we'll evolve this list over time, but this is our current sort of best guess of the best ways to build psychological safety. And head over to psychsafety.com for the newsletter, for our online community, for meetups, for training, for workshops, loads of articles and stickers and everything else. And email me at tom@psychsafety.com if you've got any questions you want to dive into a bit more, or you want to book some training or something. And as always, like and subscribe and do all that good stuff. And brilliant. Thank you, folks. I'll see you next time.